me introduce my very good friend Tom Trento, is one of the leading academic activists in the United States. He's a highly skilled debater and dynamic public speaker, which you're going to see in just a minute. Tom frequently goes toe-to-toe with Muslim Brotherhood representatives, exposing their radical agenda to the public and elected officials. Mr. Trento has earned degrees in law enforcement, philosophy, and theology. He was awarded the Carnegie Hero Medal Award for saving a man from a burning car. In his extensive travels throughout the United States and Europe, his lectures have exposed Islamic violence and infiltration in government, law enforcement, and academic institutions. Mr. Trento is one of the co-authors of Sharia, the Threat to America. He appears frequently on major media outlets and talk shows as an authority on Islamic ideology. Mr. Trento's website may be viewed at theunitedwest.org. The title of Mr. Trento's first presentation, one of two, is The Culture in Crisis, America with God. Tom Trento, ladies and gentlemen, give him a warm welcome.
This is going to be a very interactive day where we're going to interact with you. Our desire is to accomplish objectives that you see important in your life. We're going to throw out some that are very, very important for you to consider. So it's going to be a good time. My dear friend, Dr. Richard Swire, has a doctorate. He's also retired Army, 23, 24 years, jumped out of airplanes. One of his unique claims to fame was being on duty in Germany in the summer of 1972, when the folks that we visit in Israel on the other side of, on the east side of Jerusalem, when they decided to kill 11 Israelis on that fateful day. And Rich's squad was called to provide protection to the Olympic Village. So he had his taste of terrorism starting back in 1972, and he served on a commission with President Reagan to come up with a concept of never negotiating with your terrorist enemies to get a hostage back, never negotiate. He's got a very, very interesting background in national security, but also he's committed his life to teaching and doing the kind of work we're doing here. Got two great speakers following me, but I got my name on the marquee. I don't know that. You know, why don't you just draw a target right underneath there? I'm just going to be here. Come and get it. But we have a lot going on, and I think that's the first time I've seen somebody with a triple threat. You can do the Pledge of Allegiance, you can pray, and you can sing the national anthem. Gary, thank you very much for fulfilling the role of three people. And I'm sure as we go through the morning, we're going to thank the folks that put this together, but it would not be possible without Dr. Melvin Chen right there. If you could stand up, sir. You're the driving force behind this. And his wife is in the back. If you could raise your hand, there we go. And the staff. Whenever we have put together events like this, we always refer to them as fund losers, because they always lose money. But you're not in this for making money. But if anyone wants to help offset some of the costs, I'm sure Dr. Chen is not going to turn down any donations or anything like that. Well, we've got a lot going on today. And right there you see the flag being flown. What? What's that mean? Flag? Distress. That's the original meaning. When the flag was flown upside down, it was a sign before iPhones and everything else. Hey, we got a problem here. There's some people in trouble. There's some property in trouble. Help us out. But it's become used by, I'll refer to those who are opposed to a particular way of thinking, which you're clearly going to understand today. Those opposed to that particular way of thinking, this has become a symbol for protest. to protest the United States. So, and I think it symbolically illustrates a very dramatic divide taking place in the United States over this piece of material that's flying right over there. Such an intense battle like we've never seen in our lives, whether or not that deserves a unique and dedicated recognition of something special. It's not perfect, it's got stains on it, but it has a uniqueness like no other entity, no other contract of human beings called together in the history of the world. And we can list, we had about 2 weeks, all the great accomplishments that that flag has covered or led or bled in its almost 250-year history. There's a battle for that flag going on right now. But I got to thank all of you right now for coming here this morning. Now, it's not a bad place to come to, Sarasota, Florida. Not a bad place at all. But you know, it's Saturday morning. You could be right there this morning, enjoying that. Or you could be hitting one of the beautiful shopping centers in Sarasota. But most likely, if I kind of know most of you, this is where you would be if you weren't here right now. You'd be right there, catching a little extra sleep. But you sacrificed. You made a sacrifice. You took some money out of your wallet, not too much. This was a fairly inexpensive conference. A little bit of money, but a lot of time, a significant portion of time in your busy weeks. You sacrificed. But so did these guys. They sacrificed a couple of weeks ago. There was a controversy roiling over these 4 American heroes. And by clarification, the 2 on the left were members of the unique and elite unit, the Green Beret. The 2 on the right were assigned to a Green Beret task force. All 4 were killed, and it may be surprising that we're in Niger. Anybody know where Niger is? Anybody ever been in Niger? You know where it is? It's in northern Africa. It borders that wonderful resort town country of Libya. And right now, quietly, we have folks in many countries, 50, 60, 70, who knows? Many. We have an Islamic attack, global attack going on worldwide. And in order to protect the homeland, you gotta venture out. And these gentlemen said, you know, we want to be there, we want to be on the front lines, and we want to be the tip of that spear joining these elite forces. And many of us in here are very familiar with the Vaughns, Bill and Karen Vaughn, who lost their son Aaron on August 6, 2011, when Extortion 17 went down. But these guys truly have sacrificed. But you know what? Some people like to make political points. And again, what we're going to do today is show a divide, almost like the divide in this room. One side of the country, 66 million or so, stand on one side, and about 62, 63 million per the last vote on the other side. This individual is down by us. I live in South Florida, and she's in the Miami area, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. And historically, she's been somebody that likes the limelight, and she has 200 hats and crazy outfits and, you know, does crazy stuff for the most part. But this controversy and the illustration of the divide we're facing, and I'll lay out some solutions for this divide, is represented in the fact that somebody insignificant, without all the facts, has created a firestorm in our political process, because on the other side of the conservative side, on the other side happens to be that thing we call the media, the mainstream media. And they will take, have you noticed this? Any opportunity in the world to go after Donald Trump. Have you noticed that? Yes. They used to love the guy when he wasn't in a position to impact their lives, but just have fun with them. And now he's in a position to impact their lives, they hate him. But that's the problem. The forces against the conservative worldview are great and dynamic. And, you know, she's been a diehard supporter of the left, of President Obama for years. It's really all you have to know. This is fake news in many, many respects. That's the battle we fight. And they're going after this guy right here. Now, anybody know Donald Trump by any chance? He's a, I'll jump ahead. No, let me get back in a second. I've had an opportunity to spend some time at Mar-a-Lago, different events. And in fact, in March of 2011, we changed our name, some of you may have remembered, the Florida Security Council to the United West. We did it up at Mar-a-Lago, down in Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach. And he had just come off the golf course, and I was standing in the back of the room, and he walks up, he goes, you know, this is, oh, I know, you know, because we rented the place and all of that. And I said, hey, you want to speak? And he goes, yeah. So we brought him up in his golf pink shirt, pink hat, and the whole thing. And he spoke for about 20 minutes on national security and all issues, and was, you know, warmly received, did a great job. First thing he did, he took off his hat. He said, look, it's my hair. And he's throwing his hair all over the place. He's really a very nice guy, but he's a New York, anybody from New York in here? All right. New Jersey, anybody in New Jersey? People from New York and New Jersey are a little bit different. You got to understand that, you know, particularly down here in the South or the West. We see life, we react to things a little differently. We're being accused of being aggressive and nasty and all this. We're just the way we are, just especially if you're Italian. But he's a New York billionaire. He's got a ton of money and he's from New York. So he's not the most well-rounded or soft-edged individual. But I believe, and that's why I selected this slide, I believe God in his infinite wisdom picked an imperfect man to complete an imperfect task in an imperfect country, but to move it all ahead. So I view this, and I think many of you do, as something much bigger than a political change that occurred on November 8th, 2016. This is a dynamic cultural revolution, and the other side will fight to the death. On the 19th of November, we found out, just a couple of weeks after the election, that the communists in South Florida, yes, there are communists in South Florida, and Antifa was going to hold a protest. Actually, we found out about 2 weeks earlier. They were going to hold a protest on the 19th of November at Mar-a-Lago. From the river to the sea, basically, the lake to the sea. Mar is lake, sea, lago. His house is on the island of Palm Beach. His backyard is the Intracoastal, the lake, and his front yard is the Atlantic Ocean, Mar-a-Lago. Used to belong to the Post family, Post cereal. They donated it to Palm Beach County. It went into complete disarray. It was a shambles. Trump bought it for $7 million 20 years ago, and it's worth, you know, $150 million now. That's capitalism. But we found out that the bad guys were going to protest Donald Trump's house. So we went undercover into Antifa and the communist folks and all of that and started attending some of their meetings. And I'm fairly well known by the Muslim community, but not too well known by the communist community, which is up and coming. Though I did go to one communist meeting all day in Chicago at, it was at a Catholic university right downtown Chicago. And I went as a New Jersey truck driver, which wasn't hard because I used to be a New Jersey truck driver. I sat through that thing. You know who the most, there was 100 people in the conference all day. It was the East Coast Communist Society Convention. It was on Halloween because I went to a Halloween party with communists, which is a pretty cool way to roll. Most of the people in the conference were school teachers, unions. It was really amazing. And their argument was very simple. Their argument was that communism per se is the perfect system. You know, you take from people who have and give to people who don't have to bring this parity, this equality, then no one gets mad at anyone else, except maybe the people you take from. but no one gets mad at anyone else, and it's a beautiful world. And the only problem has been the implementation of communism, not the fact of communism. And we're back to that again. And we did some interesting videos that maybe we'll show you later on, maybe, or you can go to our website. And we thought, okay, these are a bunch of idiot kids. They're going to dry up and go away. Well, with the infusion of the left media and the infusion of heavy-duty leftist capital through George Soros and others, they have staying power. And I'll end my second hour with an explanation of what's going to happen on November 4th with a nationwide movement to shut down this country until Pence and Trump are thrown out. That's how we'll end this. But right now, if you get nothing else out of my presentation, remember that picture. Here's a man who isn't necessarily religious. He calls himself a Christian, and he likes that. It's kind of cultural and comfortable. But in terms of a vital personal relationship with God each and every day, this is somewhat new to him. These are a bunch of pastors and priests. I think there may be even some rabbis in there, laying hands on him, praying for him. That's difficult. When you're the President of the United States, you're not into this religion stuff, and you have people praying for you like that. That's a very unique moment. And for those of you who have a belief, a vital belief in God, this picture should not be seen lightly. It should be seen as an objective of a real God desiring to use a weak man to do great things. That's what this ought to represent. We ought to be upholding him. If you believe in prayer, we ought to be upholding him and upholding this. Now, when you see that, somebody tell me, what do you see? Liberty, freedom. By freedom, what do you mean by freedom? Expound on that a little bit.
Speech, religion, rights.
Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to live, the Bill of Rights.
The security of rule of law.
The security of the rule of law. Critically important in a civilized society. What else?
Protection.
What do you see? The United States Constitution. Safety and protection.
Have the ability to, when you're away from home, like way away.
Like you serving overseas, Barbara.
It's home. That's what that means is home.
Have the ability to.
Barbara served in the Middle East and probably longed to see that on American soil for many years. Yeah.
Concealed carry. Yeah.
What, concealed carry? The Second Amendment. What's that?
Military sacrifices.
The military sacrifice.
Right to life.
Right to life, protection of the unborn.
Boy, this is the biggest group of haters.
Yeah,
in the
what a
world.
bunch of haters in here. Yeah.
Have the ability to change our station in life at will.
Okay. Well, I'm going to later on have a little fun with you guys. Half of you are going to be leftists, and half of you are going to be conservatives. And we're going to try to create our own country, all right? We'll do that a little later. But many people, what do many leaders on the left of Antifa, Black Lives Matter, by any means necessary, refuse fascism, all these various groups, the Democrat Party, what do, and we're going to show you the decline of the Democrat Party. I come from a blue-collar Democrat, New Jersey Teamster family. And many of you know that if John F. Kennedy were alive today, he'd be a what? He'd be a Republican. His views. What do some of the people on the left see when they look at this thing?
Racism.
Oppression, racism, colonialism, evil all over the world.
Bigotry.
All right, and is any of that true? Are there elements of that that have some truth?
Sure.
Yes, no, yes, no. All right, we'll get into it. The big idea, whenever I do anything, my objective is to leave everybody with at least one overarching idea upon which you build all the other little things you hear throughout the day. My big idea is Deus Vita. Deus Vita. What does that mean? It's Latin for all you Latin scholars.
Two vitals.
Deus, God, Vita, lives. God lives. That there's such a thing, it goes beyond a conceptual ideas philosophically, but there's an actual entity that put this stuff together. I understand all that stuff can be debated. I am trained as a theologian, more than that, a Christian apologist, spending the first half of my life debating everybody in the world and television and campuses and everything on whether or not God exists and all of that. For the sake of this meeting, my presupposition is the God of the Jewish world and the Christian world, the Judeo-Christian God, truly exists. If we could agree on that, and we possibly could construct a Weltanschauung, a worldview that is coherent, it makes sense. Does it drive you crazy or not when you talk to your cousin who's a leftist for about how many seconds before they're screaming and yelling at you?
Calling your name.
3 seconds, 5 seconds. I'm going to lay out in my sessions why there's an inability to communicate with people because of a basic change in the worldview, a basic change in how people view God. And this is a political conference in many, many respects, so that we can vote the truth or the consequences November 6, 2018. But if you could understand the underlying philosophical, theological reasons for why people vote the way they do, you have a better chance of mobilizing those who believe the way we do and educating those who don't. So we're doing some pretty serious work here this morning. There's the guy who's our president. That's that meeting I was telling you about on the left, where he came into our national security meeting. And what do you think? Is he doing a good job or what? Give him a hand. Anybody in here that's done anything publicly, and you see something negative in the press, or a press release, or a letter comes from the school teacher, whatever, your stomach turns, your heart turns. Imagine that 24 hours a day. He can't do anything right. His wife isn't even his wife right now. Did you hear that one? No. There's a substitute Melania running around. It was out yesterday, and they're showing pictures. This is not the real one. This is the real one. It's crazy stuff. We're in a cultural war. America will win or lose this cultural war during President Trump's during these 4 years. Really, the track is being laid to determine the direction that key institutions in this country will go. Those institutions determine the body politic and how people live. Name some institutions.
Religion.
Religion is an institution. What else?
Colleges.
The academy, the universities.
Marriage.
Marriage is an institution, absolutely. What else? The family's an institution.
Military.
The military, the Supreme Court. These various institutions, which by nature educate and teach what? If they used to teach one thing and now they teach something else, you have a cultural war going on. Because the people that don't want to be taught new stuff, because they don't believe it, say resist. And the ones who don't like the old stuff, want to change it to the new stuff, resist. And you have a cultural war. That's exactly what we're in. And these next 4 years will determine where it ends. So, how the hell, that's an article that was written on November 9th. How the hell did Trump get elected? Let me open it up for a second. Were you shocked on November 8th? Did anybody really believe it was going to No? Yes, no, yes.
No.
You were shocked? Tell us about that for a second.
I'm from California.
No wonder you're shocked.
And what?
I understand corruption and debt. The Californians don't even have a Republican Party because the Democrats have already bought out the Republican primary. So I expected Hillary to basically get 1 million or so
Fake votes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he's from California. He understands the corruption and the weakness of the Republican Party out there, and thought Hillary would pull out enough dead people votes. In 1994, I think it was, contract with America, Gingrich, remember that?
Yes.
I left Florida, I went to California 3 up in Sacramento, and I ran one of the congressional races for Gingrich. We almost won, so I'm very familiar for many years with California politics. And, well, again, here's logistically how he won. If you remember in 2014, Republicans controlled the Senate and the House. They had a dominant position in the Senate and the House. Could they get anything done, the Republicans?
No.
There were two issues very near and dear to conservative Republicans, Reagan Republicans. One on the left was the funding of Planned Parenthood. Now, most conservatives hold to a pro-life position, but I don't think there's any conservative that will say, no, we need to fund Planned Parenthood to do more abortions with taxpayer money. I don't know any conservatives that say that. So a vote came up. There was a move to defund Planned Parenthood. They were incapable. The U.S. Congress in 2014, Republican controlled, they were incapable of defunding Planned Parenthood. Couldn't get it done. And then the whole Obama-Iran deal, the Republican Party took a nosedive, took a fall on that one, when the Republican Party, particularly in the Senate, was in a position to stop the Iran deal and make it a treaty, which is what it should have been. But a bunch of senators wanted to grandstand for the 2016 election, and they essentially sold the country out on a very, very, very bad deal. Those two issues got people like myself, who have been Republicans a long time, to philosophically leave the party. Say, this is crazy. If you can't get two simple things done, what are we doing here, ladies and gentlemen? And that was felt by a lot of people, a lot of Christians in particular. And the Christian voting bloc in the U.S. is massive. You'll see that in a little while. As a result, Republican voters were spitting mad at the establishment, the GOP. They're cutting they're on a limb, cutting the limb, destroying their own party by not living by the principles that they preach. And then this miracle happens. And then a miracle happens. And that's the miracle that night. I was very surprised. We were in, Mark and myself, we were in the Victory headquarters in Palm Beach, Florida. And it wasn't looking too good, and a couple of states started to change. Very exciting evening. By the way, I direct the United West, as Rich said, which is an educational counterterrorism organization. Our goals are to defend the Constitution, defend the state of Israel's right to exist. That's our #1 national security partner. To defeat the left and to defeat Islamic jihad. That's our goals. And I got two guys here today. Mark, if you can raise your hand. Mark comes all over, and Barry. Barry's right here. You can talk to them during the break. We travel all over the world together, trying to cause a little trouble here and there. Republicans take over the Senate, plus vice president for ties. And so right now, there's control of the Senate, there's control of the House, but it goes even better than that. There's 34 states controlled by Republican governors, and there are 32 state legislatures controlled by Republicans in the United States. So there's a huge movement, and if you graph this on a map, you'll see it's in all the flyover states for the most part. You look at the East Coast, and they're the blue states. You look at the West Coast, blue states, and then the center is all the red. But this is the political situation of today. But here's an article that will graphically illustrate this cultural crisis. I want you to meet Gigi Lazzarato. I don't have a lot of time to figure this out. I'm just going to read it. after coming out as a gay male in her teens, and later a transgender female, Jizzy Lazarato thought she was done coming out. But that all changed when the YouTube sensation, Gigi, met model and activist Natalia Getty, also 24. It's crazy how life takes you on these roads you never expect, says Gigi. And she is coming out as a lesbian to her 2.4 million YouTube channel subscribers. I never thought I'd fall for a girl, but I wouldn't change it for the world. Now, don't even try to figure that out. I just want to draw your attention to two items. Number one, she has 2.4 million subscribers. That says something about the human nature. That says something about the mind, the heart, the soul. But more so, this wasn't in the underground gay magazine of Chicago. Look what publication this is in. This is in People magazine. So People is saying, hey, look at the new culture we have. They look at that flag and talk about those freedoms. We have the freedom to do anything we want and be anything we want. No constraints. Physically, sexually, spiritually, culturally. The last time I looked, freedom necessitates restraint. Otherwise you have chaos. All right, this thing called Western civilization. It's important to understand a little bit about where we came from to know where we are and where we ought to go. Our founding documents, our history, come to us primarily through the Greek Empire, 800 BC to 600 AD, about 1,400 years of Greek thought, Greek work, and obviously the Roman Empire, and the Greeks and Romans are very, very close, not only geographically, but in thought and in idea. And if you, as I did, if you submit your DNA to Ancestry.com and you're Italian, they have Italian Greek. It always comes back that way because those cultures were so close together. So we have all those years of philosophy, some theology. Obviously from Rome we got the concept of a republic, of a citizen and a citizen's rights, and then Christianity grew out of Rome. And add to this the Judeo part, which was underlying the Greek and Roman part. You know, the Jewish history goes back 3,500, 4,000 years, and the Hebrew Bible goes back 3,000 years. So if you're a Christian today, you have Jewish roots, and thank God for the faithful Jews through the years that recorded the document upon which we base our faith. Critically important. And then the Christian part of the Bible is the second part. The Christians accept the Jewish part of the Bible and the Christian part. The Jews, for the most part, accept the Jewish part, except if you're usually a Jew from New York, you don't accept anything, but the Israelis do. And most Jews haven't bought into the Christian part of the Bible yet. They're still waiting for a Messiah. The Christians believe Messiah came once, and we're waiting for a second return. So we'll find out at some point how that works out. But this isn't a theological analysis per se. But here's what I want us to agree on as we move through the day. Could we agree that from Western civilization, from the Judeo-Christian foundations, we got 10 rules, 10 commandments? Remember you used to have to actually know those things in school and kind of look at them? Can anybody name one of them? Name all of them. Name one.
Oh, they're right there.
Don't read, don't cheat. Thou shalt not what? Thou shalt not murder, honor your parents.
Don't covet.
Don't steal, don't covet. What's covet? Want that car?
Gigi Gorgeous. Right?
Yeah. All right. Don't have any false gods before me. Don't take the name of God in vain. You look at these, you go, okay, they deal with this God. So God's saying, you got a relationship with me. Here's how I want your relationship with me to be. And this is reduced to 10 little rules. I want your relationship with me to be like this. I don't want you calling me names. I don't want you making fake pictures and crazy things of me. And I want you to come and visit me at least once a week. Come and visit me at least once a week. And you know what? If it wasn't for your mother and father, you wouldn't even be here. So be nice to them. All right? Then it turns and says, you know, there's other people out there. I want you to be this way toward these other people. Don't kill them. Don't kill other people. I brought you all here so you can live and work and play and have a good time. So don't kill them. Okay? And you know what? Hey, we all have a wife and a girlfriend, and the other one looks prettier, and you start doing that, you're going to have all kinds of trouble. So stay away from that adultery thing. Just avoid that. It's going to hurt everybody. It's going to hurt everybody involved. It's going to hurt me. Stay away from that. Don't steal stuff. If you don't have it, pray. I'll provide it. And don't lie. I mean, when you're going to lie, how do you build a relationship of trust and respect if we're all lying to one another? That's not going to work. Come on. And the last one, and you know, a lot of these are action. This is one of thought, just a covet. It's a commandment to stop a particular way you think, not the way you act. Killing is an act. Coveting is a thought. So very simply, God proscribes some ways in which an individual should relate to him and his family and his state, interestingly enough. Could we agree in this room, and we don't have to disagree if you want, that these 10 commandments form a minimal compact between people to move to organize a successful family, business, or civilized tribe? Does that make sense? Is there anything there that undermines a good, like right here? If we were going to form a little, our own little country, if we were going to do that, is there anything in here that mitigates against a successful relationship between all of us living as a tribe going out to be productive? Anything bad? Would you add anything to this?
It requires a belief in God.
It requires a belief in God, fundamentally.
Pay
Where
taxes.
your belief system is.
Would you add anything to this? Would you say?
Pay taxes.
Pay taxes. Gotta pay taxes.
Don't make that.
All right, we're going to do that a little later. That's our little experiment a little later. Now, we're going to add to the basic acceptance of minimal guidelines from God. And some people say, well, those are self-evident. They don't have to be from God. Well, when God says, don't take my name in vain, you can't have that kind of generic approach to these self-evident principles and keep all of them intact. You have to get rid of some of them. So for the sake of the conversation, for the sake of the voters in this state, I'm going to hit you with the numbers later about the Christian voters in this state. It's shocking. We'll say that these things could tie us together. Now, I'm going to walk through this. It's very important historically. All of this is leading toward what we're going to do as activists, because you could be home sleeping with your teddy bear. You're here because you're serious about this. This is going to lead toward what we can do November 8th, 2018, to keep this state red and to help others do the same deal, because it's a battle for the heart and soul of the United States of America. In 1620, this was, the Pilgrims came, where'd they come from?
England and
Holland. Holland.
They came from Holland. They were in England, they went to Holland, and what happened in Holland, why they wanted to leave Holland? They were in Holland, and Holland was a very, if you've been there, anybody been to Holland lately? Yeah, we've been going there, and I can imagine what it was like in the roaring 1620s. But in the 1620s, the Pilgrims, which were very conservative Protestant Christians, they felt that it was just too loose. The morals were too loose in Holland. Too much not following the Ten Commandments. And they had left England to bring Christianity to other lands because they felt it's something very good, very positive. So they went to Holland, and while in Holland they said, man, this is the culture here is attacking our beliefs with our children. It's destabilizing our family. We got to go somewhere else. They said, let's go settle a new land. Let's go there. We can start with a clean slate. We'll go there. And look at how the historic background. In the name of God, amen. This is the Mayflower Compact that everybody studied, a long time ago. We whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of dread, which means good, sovereign Lord King James, the King James Bible. By the grace of God, Great Britain, France, Ireland, defender of the faith, they weren't leaving because they were necessarily fighting the political system. They were missionaries, if you will, going to a new land. They're praising and honoring the kings and their leaders. Having undertaken, now they give you the reason why they came to America. Having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith and of our king and country. The Pilgrims' goal in the Mayflower Compact was to bring Christianity and English thought and English living to this new land recently discovered. A voyage to plant the first colony in northern parts of Virginia. Do by these present solemnly mutually in the presence of God and one another covenant and combine ourselves together in a, what are those words? Civil body politic. They're saying our religious beliefs, minimally the Ten Commandments, are being transported to America so that we can build a civil, with civilians, with people, body as a like-minded group, politic, some structure to have laws and direction and principles and programs. We got to figure out how to do this thing. But that's why we're going to the United States, well, to America. For our better ordering and preservation and perseverance of the ends aforesaid, by the virtue herein to enact and constitute and frame such just and equal laws. So they knew they'd have to bring laws together. Ordinances, acts, constitutions, offices from time to time shall be thought most met and convenient for the general good of the colony. So they're laying out a basic political structure for this new experiment that took place starting in 1620. We've subscribed our names at Cape Cod, and they sign off in 1620. That's the historic background to why these guys came here. Now, watch what happens here. In 1776, 1620, 1776, 150 years. So 150 years after the Pilgrims came, there was development, and a handful of them came, a couple of hundred over time, and survived. And by 1776, there's 2.5 million people. Over 150 years, the United States grew to 2.5 million people. And we know this declaration. Now, things start not going too well with King George and the others in the late 1700s. So now there was tremendous religious persecution. When the Pilgrims left, it wasn't necessarily for persecution. But when we broke ties with England, one of the issues was religious persecution, and then obviously all the political stuff happening in the colonies here. Taxation without representation. But the point is, 2.5 million people who, for the most part, where they came from, these are the immigrants, the English for the most part, believed in the Judeo-Christian worldview, 99.9%. There was some coming from here or there, but the majority of 2.5 million people, critically important, the majority could look at the Ten Commandments and say, damn right, oh no, they can't say damn, darn right, those things will guide us. We all agreed to that. Can you have a coherent and cohesive experiment when everybody agrees to the same principles? Sure. Jump ahead to today. 63 million against 66 million. There may be no return from that. There may be no return. There may be no return. Borrowing what my Orthodox Jewish friend said, the only hope for America, he's a very well-known Washington lobbyist who's out of business now because he went to jail for a bunch of years, but he's a reformed and politically and an Orthodox Jew. He told me recently the only hope for America, he said, is in a Christian revival, a religious revival. He said, Tom, you guys have to have a revival and get all these crazy people back to God. Right? I go, yeah. Well.
He's right, he is right.
Why do the Christians have it? Why can't the Jews do that?
All right, in 1876, 100 years later, we have 45 million people. Wow, they were productive, these early Americans. 45 million people in the United States in 1876. And the Judeo-Christian worldview now starts getting watered down. The Ten Commandments, yeah, 7 of them are okay, 4 pretty good. I may follow them, I may not, but I'm not buying all of them as an example of the decline of the worldview. And other competing ideologies start kicking in. What about this one? How did this impact the Christian worldview? Marx and Engels, how they impact the Christian worldview?
Started to water it down.
What were their basic beliefs? Were they Jews or Christians? Religiously, they were humanists, they were secularists, they were atheists. Religiously, no God, obviously no God. So in terms of them reading the Mayflower Compact, what would they say about that? A waste of good parchment, probably. Oh, you wasted good parchment with that one there. There is no God, you can't organize with God, all of that. So the Communist Manifesto comes out and presents a new way of being organized civilly. And a way without God, obviously, and a way in which there be equity and parity economically in society. At the same time, other thinkers start buying into a world without God, and Charles Darwin comes along. What was his contribution? Yeah, he said, for the most part, the sages and the philosophers, up to the middle 1800s, the Age of Enlightenment, for the most part, everybody agreed there's something out there, there's some great God or a lot of gods, but there's immaterial that somehow generated material, and that was the basic philosophical acceptance of thinkers up until the middle 1800s. And Darwin comes along and says, no, I have this new model. I can show you how God did not intervene or God's not necessary for us to be here. And he introduces that. Well, once you start impacting political thought and then the construction of human beings, where that comes from, now it's very easy to move into those institutions I told you about earlier. If we don't need God at the base for how we got here, we don't need God to run our society, why do we need him in the academy? Why do we need him in college? Why do we need him in medicine? Why do we need him in the family? Why do we need him determining who can marry who? Why do we need what? And all these questions came up during the Enlightenment. The Christian world at that point was shocked, and there was a Christian response to turn back to the church, and this is what some people point to as we need now. But that was in 1876. In 1965, this guy comes along, Paul Harvey. Remember him? He wrote an article, and he said, if I were Satan, and he went on to write what he would do if he were Satan. And I'm going to play a little video here. It's got some slides to it, but listen carefully to Paul Harvey. He wrote this in 1965. He sang it on the radio in 96. And it's the same thing he wrote in 65. He's saying, look, I wrote this in 65, now it's 96, and now it's 20 years later, 21 years later. So listen to this.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old, I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted, until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
Good day.
That was written in 1965.
Okay.
And for those of you who were around in 1965, you see, this decline. When I was back in the early 80s, as a young activist, I was running around the country with a talk entitled A Culture in Crisis. Oh my God, the same name today. A Culture in Crisis. And I was warning America, if we continue to do A, B, and C, some of the stuff he just spoke about, we're planting a seed. The fruit that's going to grow from the seed is going to be X, Y, and Z, which is where we are right now. Extremely frustrating. Some of the frustration you're experiencing can be settled when? In the context of this conference, how do you settle the frustrations you have? How do we change things?
Election.
Yeah, the election. And that's the focus of what we're doing. The election is a little bit over a year from now, a little bit over 365 days, probably 380 days, something like that. And I know a lot of people right now are concerned about the aggressive nature of the left and the fighting and the chaos and, we have guns too and we can fight them and all of this. I'll get into more of this in my second part, but we are, someone said earlier, a nation of law, a rule of law. We can never abandon that. That's what the other side wants. When we abandon the rule of law, then you invite extreme chaos, and through chaos is destruction. And I'll lay this out very, very clearly later on, because there's going to be an effort on November 4th to do just that of this year, 2 weeks away. Watch this. In 1976, in 1986 we have 45 million. 1976, 218 million people in the United States of America, and out of that 218 million, about 80% hold to the Ten Commandments being a valid guideline for personal and public life. That's my thesis. The Ten Commandments, people agree. They may not follow all of them, but if you ask them, are these 10 principles good for an individual personally and good for a group of people corporately, publicly? 80% of the people in 1976 would say, yeah, sure. 20% would argue against them. Back in 1776, 99% agreed. So you see what's happening. We're drifting away from the common moral bonds and beliefs that have held us together. And we introduced in the 60s the whole great society of socialistic programs. Everybody has in them, the great philosophers have said, there's a God-shaped void in everyone. Everyone has a God-shaped void. You got to fill it. When you fill it with God, who's the right shape, you're complete, satisfied, content. But like any other hole, it can be somewhat filled, temporarily filled, almost filled by, you name it, drugs, excitement, fast cars, money, whatever it is. If people have a need for God to be an authority figure and that's taken away, what is next in line to be an authority figure in our lives?
Government.
And the socialist movement starts to slowly replace the frontline safety net of churches and synagogues and nonprofits, which it historically was, because people there were helping because they wanted to help, to now mandate government aid for people funded by mandated taxes. And on a blank sheet of paper, that may look like it works. Well, it started in the 60s, and you see where it is today. 2017, 320 million people right now in this country. We're down to about 70% of the population would agree that the Ten Commandments are good guidelines for personal life and public life.
It's that high.
What are the implications of this? We're going to answer that in the second part.
It's that high.
Is that high?
Yeah.
This is not people that follow it. This is people that if you poll them, they'll say, yes, the Ten Commandments, if people follow that, maybe that's good for them. If a society follow that, that's good for them. Do you follow that? No, I don't follow that. But at least they agree it's good. So now, the reality of the implementation of the agreement versus the agreement, that's dangerous because they're not following it, and therefore the fruit of good stuff isn't happening. If a significant number of citizens reject the historic Judeo-Christian foundations of the United States, you have a culture in crisis. It's that simple. If this culture was built upon Judeo-Christian principles, this is binary, folks. Simple, A and B. If this culture was built on Judeo-Christian principles, and we can go on for hours proving that theory, that thesis, but if a significant number of citizens reject it, then your culture is in crisis. It doesn't know where it's going. The anchor upon which it's tied to something has been severed, you start to drift. Now, as a theologian, philosopher, I can lay this stuff out all day long. But sometimes all you need are the Democrats to get together to prove your philosophical points. And look what happened in 2012. Let me set it up for a second. You remember what happened in 2012 in Charlotte at the Democrat convention?
Yes.
What happened is they came to the floor to take the planks and make the platform for the Democrat convention, 2012. Well, it comes to light very, very quickly that the designers of the platform, and each plank is a piece of the platform, the designers of the platform changed the political views relating to God and Israel. There was language in the Democrat Party that said, our party is based upon the principles of God. That was taken out. They didn't want the party to be based on the principles of God anymore. So when you see me attack the Democrat Party, I'm attacking the Democrat Party, the principles of the Democrat Party. A little different than Democrats, some who may be useful idiots, some who may be confused, but I'm looking at the leaders of this. Then, in that same platform, they took the fact that the United States will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. They took that out. They said, we're not recognizing that anymore. The Democrat Party leadership made a definitive decision, we're out of this God and Israel stuff. It got back to the president, who knew he'd lose a lot of Jewish money if he didn't do something about this. He called the mayor, this poor guy, what a schmuck. They called the mayor and said, get the vote right. Overdo that vote. It's a political disaster if we throw God and Israel out. This is the effort to get God and Israel back in. Listen carefully. Tell me if you think God and Israel got voted back into the Democrat Party.
Governor, would you like to make your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This summer, I was proud to serve this party as the Platform Drafting Committee Chair. As the Chair, I come before you today to discuss two important matters related to our party's national platform. As an ordained United Methodist minister, I am here to attest and affirm that our faith and belief in God is central to the American story and informs the values we've expressed in our party's platform. In addition, President Obama recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and our party's platform should as well. Mr. Chairman, I have submitted my amendment in writing, and I believe it is being projected on the screen for the delegates to see. I move adoption of the amendment as submitted and shown to the delegates.
A motion has been made. Is there a second? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, the matter requires a 2/3 vote in the affirmative. All those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. In the opinion of the... Let me do that again. All of those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. I guess.
You've got a rule, and then you've got to let them do what they're going to do.
I'll do that one more time. All those delegates in favor say aye. All those delegates opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 have voted in the affirmative. The motion is adopted, and the platform has been amended as shown on the screen. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, that little episode in September 2012 graphically illustrates the divide in this country. And my second part, we'll get into some interesting stuff to experience it, and then we're going to lay out a groundwork for what can be done about it for November 8th, 2018. So we're going to have a great time. Thank you all for coming, and Rich is going to take over, and then I can't wait to hear our dear friend Suzanne.